Some of you may know that I used to teach science at schools. One of the things that we taught in secondary science was Newton's 3 laws of motion. This video is about how those 3 laws are very applicable to strength training. The first law is that a body at rest stays at rest and a body in motion stays in motion. It's really logical. Basically, if something is on the ground, unless you do something to it or something happens to it, it's not going to move. By the same token, if there's something rolling across the floor, unless something stops it, it's going to keep on rolling. So in strength terms, that means if you don't do the work, the weight's probably not going to move. The second is force equals mass times acceleration. Now, we take advantage of that with kettlebells using movements like the swing. With the swing, we might be moving a 24 kilo kettlebell, but we're generating so much more force than that. As we hinge and snap, our hips explode and put a huge amount of impact through the ground, well more than the 24 kilos. If it was just 24 kilos, the bell would not fling out. A deadlift, typically you're putting slightly more than the amount of weight on the bar. The words just aren't working for me today. The second law is that force equals mass times acceleration. So what that means is that whether I'm lifting a big bell or a small bell or a big heavy bar or a light bar, I can still generate more force than is on the bar. When you do a swing, you always generate a lot more force, if you do it well, than the weight of the bell that you're holding. If you only generated 16 kilos, then the weight would probably stay on the ground. You've actually got to move it by generating more force than what the weight of the bell says, or than what the number on the bell says. So they actually put a force plate under Pavel probably 10 years ago now. And when Pavel Tsatsouline was swinging, he was swinging a 24 kilo bell, but he was producing 500 pounds of pressure. That's about 230 kilos, give or take. Might be 240, but we're in that sort of ballpark. And so you can generate so much force by doing things with the right intention and by being really snappy. So if you're stuck at home and you've only got a 16 kilo bell, the fact that force equals mass times acceleration means you can generate all that force by moving that bell faster and by being snappier with your hips as you do things. So that's the second law. The third law is probably the one that I think is the most important for people to be aware of, and that's for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So that's the idea that if when I push on the wall, it's not just the wall being pushed, but also there's a resistance going against my hands. It means that if you deadlift, you can't just, if I'm standing on nothing and try and do a deadlift, it's not going to work. Without me pushing through the floor, I'm not actually going to be able to lift the weight. And so all force when you're lifting things comes from the ground. The goal is to make that transmission of force from the ground into the implement as smooth as you can. The better you are, the less force leaks out in different ways around the place as you do it. So that means that on a deadlift or on a press, you're actually still generating the force through your feet. It's just that how you generate that force into the implement changes ever so slightly.